Hi, my name is Ryan Langwish, and this is Ludo Lodge, a channel about sparking growth in your journey as a game designer. And today I'm doing the final installment of a series looking at the 7 habits of highly effective people and talking about how those habits apply to life as a game designer and game designers that are striving to be more effective in their craft and make better games. And today we're talking about habit number 7, which is sharpen the saw. And in the book, when it shows the diagram of the different habits, sharpen the saw is this big circle around the outside. And this is emphasizing the fact that adopting these habits into your life isn't just something that you kind of do and then don't worry about anymore, but rather there's this cycle. And sharpen the saw and embracing the habit of sharpening the saw is saying self-improvement, improvement in these areas, it never ends, right? There's no end point. There's always ways to improve and to get better. And that's kind of already a little bit of what we've talked about with each of these habits, right? Each of these habits has kind of defined one axis on which you could improve as a game designer and kind of, grow and practice these habits. But embracing sharpening the saw kind of implies another level of reflection and intentional revisiting of these habits, among other things that'll help you be more effective as a game designer. And so one way you might practice this habit is simply regularly reviewing the other habits, right? If I go back and, maybe I put it on a specific cadence that, every month I'm going to do a little effectiveness review in my game design journey, right? And I'm going to say, okay, how am I doing on habit number 1? I'm being proactive in the things that I'm pursuing. And just step through each one of those and kind of just ask yourself the question. But then that word in habit 7, sharpen, kind of implies the next question of how do I step that up? How could I do a little better in this area? How could I improve? And a lot of times the reason we don't sharpen the saw in, whether it's our game design journey or something else in our lives is simply because we kind of forget, right? We kind of just keep going on. Life is fairly distracting in a lot of different ways, and we can kind of go on our happy way doing the things that we do. And so a lot of times it takes that intentional scheduling, honestly, in a lot of cases, of that review and that retrospective to say, okay, I am going to intentionally sit down and look back and evaluate how am I doing and where can I improve. And just doing that, honestly, is a lot more than a lot of people will do in their lives when it comes to self-improvement, is that very intentional review process of how you can improve based on how things have gone recently. Now, there's things you can do to make that more effective, and you can start kind of getting into these layers of, you can start having retrospectives on how your retrospectives can be more effective, right? How can your review process be improved? And that definitely is in the spirit of all of this. But one thing that's extremely powerful whenever you're trying to kind of evaluate past progress and determine what you could do to improve is simply the tracking of various metrics. And it maybe takes some brainstorming to figure out what the right metrics are. But having something you can point to that's measurable is extremely powerful when it comes to, evaluating where you're at. Because it's one thing to sit down and be like, how did I do? And all you're going off of is kind of your memory and how you feel about it. And you could probably get a lot out of that process still. But there's something even more powerful about saying, okay, I have this metric that says I, did this well in this specific area, or this is exactly what happened. And I can maybe compare that metric against the previous period of time that I reviewed, and did I improve in that area? It allows you to kind of measure that over time. And then it also gives you a way to make kind of these smart goals that I can make a goal that's very clear whether I hit it, right? If it's measurable, I can determine at my next time that I'm kind of reviewing these things of, did I actually achieve this goal or did I not achieve this goal? Wishy-washy goals, better than no goals, but definitely inferior to having very specific, measurable goals that you can determine really how you're doing. Not so much because it's important to know, like, did you achieve the goal or did you not? Though it certainly, is powerful to feel like, that satisfaction of achieving a goal, but more because it just gives you a clear understanding of where you're at and allows you to use that information. And so what would these metrics possibly look like? I mean, it could be maybe you just are thinking, I am not consistent enough about dedicating time to work on game design stuff. Well, that's trackable, right? Like you could track time, just simply time that you put into game design and measure that over time. Maybe you specifically are thinking, you know what, I'm not involved enough in kind of the greater game design community. I'm kind of working in isolation. Maybe you have a metric of how many specific times or maybe hours did I put into playtesting other people's games. Or maybe I'm looking to get more playtests on my own game and I want to set a metric of how many playtests I was able to get in. Whatever it is, and it's going to vary as far as what's going to work best for you, but having a metric like that just is very powerful when you are going to review back on it to give you that information to apply to the next iteration, much like we've talked about how the game design iterations, any improvements you make to that process are going to be reaped over and over and over again. Another exercise that can be useful in this kind of process of sharpening the saw is to actually return back to learning resources that have been powerful for you in the past, whether that's books that you've read, or maybe it was a podcast you listened to, or a video or something. Because in my experience, depending on where you are in your life, like you can get completely different things out of the same resource. I could listen to a podcast and 2 years later listen to the same podcast and get a whole different perspective on that simply because of what's happening with my projects at that time or what I'm doing. And actually, I found that to be true. I've actually read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People twice, probably about 3 years apart. And I totally found that to be true, that, and it helps that the principles in this book are very wide ranging as far as how they can apply to your life, which is part of the reason why I'm kind of able to relate it to life as a game designer. And so, I found reading through it the second time, my mind going to completely different places because of where I was at. And so keeping in mind when you find something, whether it's a book or a podcast or something that strikes you or inspires you, or you feel, moved the needle for you as a game designer, having a way to keep track of those, like not letting it just kind of like disappear into something you did in the past, but having it be something that you could return to in the future, is another powerful habit to get into, to kind of have those resources. And sometimes you just need a little bit of a inspirational push, and something like that has proven to do that for you in the past can be the perfect thing to do that again. And so I'd encourage you to think about habit number 7, sharpening the saw, and what that might look like for you. And I think it's good to kind of frame it the right way in your mind, to not think of, this self-improvement path as this, I'm never going to be good enough, I'm never going to quite get there, it just is always out of reach, but rather as a very exciting, like, there is no limit to where I can go. Like, if I am continually working to reflect and improve just a little bit, like, there is no limit to how far I can go in my journey as a game designer. And I think that's something I find very exciting, specifically about game design and as well as other things. And hopefully that's exciting for you as well. And hopefully this whole series has kind of just gotten you thinking. I know for me, it has definitely gotten me thinking a lot about my own journey as a game designer and kind of the different ways that I could improve, or things that I should work more on. So hopefully that did some of that for you as well. And I will leave you with the question of, what would you most like to improve in as a game designer in the next year? I know for me specifically, I think I want to work at improving at just co-designing. So I have had the opportunity recently to dip my toes in a little bit more of a co-design experience. And, going through the videos talking here about the power of synergy and some of these things has got me thinking a lot about kind of just the potential of exploring that more. It's not something that I've done a whole lot. So I would love in a year from now if I've just done a lot more practical co-design and grown in that area in my ability to work well in collaboration with other designers. So that's something specifically that I have in mind for myself. But I'd love if you could think about that and maybe leave down in the comments what you think would be the area you'd most like to improve as a game designer. And thanks for watching. If you've stuck with the whole series, I appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. I'd love any feedback on content you'd like to see, and I will see you in the next video.